Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Our topic today, in God's time, I want to tell you a little bit about how I chose this topic. I was asked to do a lecture for another group on the third chapter of a book from Joana de Angelis. I will bring the book in a minute. And I thought to myself, well, let me read chapter 1 and 2 so that I can see the sequence in the book to see, what led to this particular theme and what themes came before. And I was studying that, I was reading that. And one day here at the center, someone shared a level of anguish and frustration with herself in face of the process of enlightenment and evolution. And that person was talking about how frustrated she feels with herself. And immediately what I was reading was like, wow, that would be really good, although it wasn't what I was focusing to do a lecture. I'm going to turn that into a lecture because I think that this is a very common feeling. So have you not ever felt that way? Like, oh my goodness, I'm stuck. Oh my goodness, everybody else is evolving and I'm not. I'm so frustrated. I'm so impatient with myself. This thing is way too slow. I can't believe I'm still doing these very same things and behavior, and I can't change. So we have all these feelings and questions and kind of frustration. And when I was thinking about that, the image of the seed came to my mind. So I really wanted to take a minute and look at this image because I will mention it now, and at the very end we're gonna bring back the image into our minds. So on top of the sentiments that we have, the frustration that we have with ourselves, there is also guilt that we carry. There is also pressure that we put into ourselves in terms of how fast should I be evolving, right? Maybe I should be further ahead than I am today. So there's all these pressure and this idea that we should be moving at a certain pace, which I'm not quite sure where it comes from. So we are dealing with unrealistic expectations for ourselves. And when I teach students and therapists to write goals for their own patients, we use SMART goals. So SMART means when you are making a goal for your patient, it has to be specific, it has to be measurable, you have to be able to quantify that goal. It has to be achievable. That is an important one. And I'm blanking on that. Specific, measurable, achievable, it come to me. And it has to be into a time relevant. And it has to be into a time frame. So I feel that part of the anguish that we experience is that we set goals that are not achievable for the time frame that we are establishing. So let's think of the time frame of one incarnation. And so part of the anguish is setting goals that perhaps would be achievable in the course of many incarnations, or perhaps even like sometimes we're setting goals that are only achievable when we are borderline pure spirits. So that is really messed up, right? that is really anxiety provoking. So when we think about our evolution, it's good if we can frame things correctly. Now, when we think about the seed, what I would like to evoke is this idea that that's us, seeds. And the seed has a very coarse outing, right? So the plant needs to break through that. And the seed, in order to bloom, it's placed into a very hostile environment, which is cold, which is dark, and it has to really break through this coarse shell and pass through all the difficult environment where it is placed in until it breaks through the ground and move towards the light. So that's us. So the goal for today at the cognitive level is to review and understand the human evolution into God's time. One of the greatest contributions of Spiritism is that Spiritism reframes life for us. So what Spiritism does is help us to observe life and to entertain life from a higher perspective. I was watching a movie yesterday, The Holdovers, and it was won some Oscars, and it's this kid that's left behind in this boarding school during the Christmas time with the history professor. And the history professor tells him during this time over the holidays that they're spending together that, you know, that's what history is about. Understanding history helps us to understand our present moment. Mm-hmm. And I thought, wow, that is really good, because that really fits into what I will be doing tomorrow. So we're going to go back a little bit in history to understand what is that we are facing today in terms of evolution, why evolution is so difficult and slow, so we can gain a different perspective. And from that perspective, we can take action in terms of setting realistic expectations for our own incarnation. So hopefully by the end of the lecture, when you leave today, you're going to go home and you're going to think, let me reset my goals for this incarnation based on what I heard this morning. And then finally, hopefully you also be able to leave here experiencing increased lightness and hope by the end of today's lecture. So those are the 3 goals for this morning. This is the book from Joanna, Finding Peace and Health. And all the content comes from chapter 1, which is a very difficult chapter. It really challenged my thinking process. I studied very hard, and I still feel that I don't fully understand. So I have talked to Joanna herself and said, please help me to understand this. And then I also apologize if I have oversimplified or distorted any of her ideas. But this is the best understanding that I have of this chapter 1. So some concepts that she brings that I think are important for us to understand, especially if you're new to Spiritism. We don't really understand fully the process of evolution, but we have some ideas. For instance, God creates what's called the intelligent principle. Don't ask me what that is exactly or to define, but it's a principle that's not material. And this principle is going to evolve until a point that it becomes humanized. So it has many experiences in many different levels of nature until it develops itself to the point that it gains consciousness and the ability to think and to have awareness of self, others, and God. How does that happen? It happens through different experiences that this principle undergoes here on the incarnate realm and also in the spiritual realm. So these experiences help to shape up not only the principle, the spiritual principle, but also the body where the principle is manifesting itself. And it happens in such a way that at some point we have the verticalization of the body. So here we are on 2 feet, and also it promotes what she calls moral ascension and develops the emotional sensitivity. So this is the process of evolution. And she does talk about, so before the human brain, before humanity, we have this reptile brain that develops, and it develops in preparation for future expressions of the brain. So the brain has evolved. The reptile brain is the very first structure. It's very automatic. It's responsible for vital functions like breathing, like your cardiac rhythm, and things like that. So once we reach a level of higher thinking, which is the development of the neocortex, which is what we call like our brain, right? Then we have developed the ability to think, and then we have developed intelligence, discernment, emotion, and sentiment. So for us to be here, we have to appreciate the time that it has taken to develop all these structures so that we could sit here and communicate and have a dialogue and think and make choices. There is an incredible amount of time, and things were developed very gradually and slowly, with one structure preparing the field or the environment for the future structures. So that's how we came with this triune brain, where first you have the reptile brain, again, survival instincts. Then you have the development, what they call the mammalian brain, where you have the emotional center. And then later on, you have the development of the new brain, or what they call the neocortex, which will allow us for higher order of thinking. Now, when you look at this is the brain of one of our Homo species, right? So there are many. Today we have the Homo sapiens, but we had the Homo erectus and many other categories or levels of development. And so what Joanna says is that in this very first way back species, there is a presence of thought, but thought was in that phase this very gross representation of the divine psychic. But what called my attention to this is that from very early on, as always, God has been present, right? As a force that propels us forward, that allow us to overcome stages and keep moving towards growth and enlightenment. So the brain structures are unable to decodify the ideas and to understand the world. So we are already on both feet. We are relating to the world, but we don't understand the world at all. We can't make sense of the things that we are seeing. Just like I couldn't make sense of Joanna's writing, I felt like my brain needs a few more neurons and a little bit of higher development of my frontal cortex for me to fully understand everything that is here. And that is true. Our brain continues to evolve. It's by no means finished, right? And then she says that this brain is the initial automatism, the primitive thought, representing the love of God in the gist of the blooming being. So first expressions of thinking, of intelligence, in a brain that is not yet capable of actually offering the spirit a level of instrument that can manifest a higher level of thinking, because those things evolve parallel in connection to one another. So if you look here, you can see that you have a big difference between these both guys here were on their feet, but the one on your left is the primitive man, where she says that the thinking process was still very vague and somewhat fragmented. Whereas here you have the modern brain, and you can see some big differences. The primary difference is what? Anyone can tell me what is the primary? The size, but also, most importantly, the size of the frontal brain, which is this area here, right? So, because this is the area of executive function, is the area of thinking, is the higher area of processing. So, not so long ago, science believed that by the time we were on both feet, our brain was fully developed to the stage of today. And nowadays, we know very well that that's not true. So when we were on our both feet at first, our brain was very much still similar to the apes. So since then has been a very significant evolution of our brain and our ability to think. And that is important for us, and I will highlight that a little further. So here we have a little bit of a map of our evolution, and you can see here at the bottom, this more like white area, is all the Homo species, habilis, erectus, sapiens, which is where we are today, which is a level that we achieved from 200,000 years ago to the present moment. All right, so why am I saying all this? Why is this relevant? I just want to put to you like the long journey that we have traveled to get to where we are today. Now, the primitive man, she says, is characterized by this conglomerate of instincts, again, with almost no contact with reality. So at first, we were experiencing the world without really being able to understand the world. So we suffered, we felt heat, we felt cold, we felt pain, we noticed that sometimes there was light, sometimes there was dark, some days were wet, some days were dry. Some days people were alive and moving, and then some days they were dead and not moving anymore. And we couldn't make sense of any of that. And she's going to say, I brought a few passages from the chapter. Living in the forest where everything was hostile, these hominids who had automatically brought from their place of origin, the spiritual world, a number of psychic conditionings, had their brain very slowly propelled by this information to create neuronal components in order to perform pertinent functions that would be used in the future during the nobler legs of the intellectual and moral evolutionary journey. Thus, fear appears the first emotion accompanying the primal sensations inherent to the pleasure of eating, resting, and having sex. So, the beginning of our evolution. And she will say, for that reason, as a consequence of the discomfort caused by inclement weather, they started to imitate the animals, covering themselves with leaves and skins in cold climates, remaining naked in hot climates, and seeking shelter in the protection of the cave. These phenomena developed their archaic or pre-magical thinking, responsible for the instinct of preservation with greater definition than the rule of the strongest, which remained for a long period and even to this day. So we see slowly how we learn from contrast, from necessities, from the hostility of the environment. The hostility of the environment is what develops, is the trials, is the struggles. A lot of times we, morally speaking, we say, why am I going through so much trouble? Why life is so hard? Because it is in the hardship of life that we are actually exercising and developing our potentialities, our virtues, that we are extracting from within, or that we are just like, think of life as that dark, cold soil. But that is the perfect environment for the seed. So here we are, struggling. Those were tough times. We couldn't even make sense of the world outside. So evolution starts with us being invited to understand the world outside of us. And that's how we started to develop our thinking. So we observed that the ray strike, the thunder striking the tree, that created fire. So now we have a sense that there is fire that can actually warm us up, and we can make food out of it. We can soften our food. Now we continue to evolve, and we are able to create shelters for ourselves, and we are starting to join in groups, in families, to protect ourselves. The emotions continue to develop. We develop the fear for death. And then we evolve to a greater level where now we're starting to articulate the first sounds that end up being elaborated throughout generations, and then until the point that we can actually communicate grammatically and successfully. We also start to draw on the rocks and to communicate through writing. And so this is the process that takes us from this pre-magical period where we couldn't make sense of the world to the magic period. So she calls magic period the period that now we are starting to understand, relate to the world in a different way, and actually changing the world outside, because now we have a better understanding of the things that are happening. So we start to plant. We understand that there are seasons. We understand the need to store things. We create tools and weapons. Life is less harsh. We create the metals, and with the creation of metals, we'll start really changing the scenery where we live in, and we start to exchange things. So another level of our evolution. And then she says we enter what's called the egocentric period. This is an existing state that is characterized by bellicosity, by greed, by demands of rights, ownership, and power. And so she will say, this tumultuous phase incited an escalation of violence when they could not get what they wanted through persuasion. Do you still see that these days?
Oh, yeah.
By any chance?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, just kind of highlighting that. And revived the aggressive instincts that rendered them unreasonable, preparing them to advance to the stage of reason that reflects, understanding that the world belongs to everyone and their life is a valuable asset, which cannot and should not be squandered over meaningless or pernicious petty issues. So it seems like we're a little bit stuck here, right? And that's not even the rational period quite yet. So I find that very illuminating, because here we are in anguish, in anxiety in regards to our processes. But this seems to be a very good definition of our modus operandi. I mean, that's how we are functioning a lot of the time. And what's interesting here is that she says that reviving the aggressive instincts. So the instincts, the aggressive instincts remain there. They are there. And they get incited and they arise. And this is something important for us to keep in the mind, and I'll tell you why. Then we get to the rational thought period. So she says, with greater difficulty, rational thought began to guide their actions, broaden the scope of their knowledge, and help them better understand the existential mechanism and infinite possibilities within reach. This, in turn, gave way to science, technology, virtual communication, telecommunication, which are shortening distances around the planet, prolonging life, and making it less afflictive, and proposing the true fraternity that must bring everyone together. However, given the enormous variety of biotypes, spiritually and morally, evolving on the earth, humans are still far from reaching this remarkable goal. So that's another thing for us to keep in perspective. This is like a crazy mix of levels of evolution. We have a whole bunch that is way ahead of us and look at us and think, these people, they are so in darkness, so unconscious. And there are people that we look and say, these people, they are so clueless. And there are many people in our realm that are still living in a very primitive way, where their main concern is to work, sleep, procreate, and that is the meaning of life. There is nothing more higher or spiritual. And this is us. We are in this mix, which make things a little bit more difficult. Now, this is very, very telling, because she says it's true that evolution did not necessarily follow preset or sequential periods. Undoubtedly, there have been quantum leaps, so it is approximately only in the last 10,000 years. Look at this guy, Homo sapiens. We are 200,000 years to present. Out of that time, 10,000 years, that reason, discernment, and consciousness have really taken hold in the human being, allowing more meaningful reflections regarding life. So, dear friends, we just got started in having a little bit of what truly characterizes the human species, right? Which is the ability to think and to have discernment. When we think about the religious process, how do we evolve in terms of religion, okay, and spirituality? This is a whole entire text. I put in bullets here. So first sentiment that led to this connection with religious spirituality was fear and horror. The primitive man observed everywhere destruction and rebirth. So created this idea that, he needed to kill in order to enjoy being able to be live. And from that, the first human Holocaust came to take place. Then we see the appearance of cults and worship and different gods. From that, we have the appearance of leaders and the idea of punishment. So if you don't follow the spiritual leader, you are now punished by that. That punishment eventually becomes under the category of crimes. You have the rise of the ancient civilizations with many spirits, higher order, intellectually developed spirits incarnating. We have Moses with the idea of one God, and we get to Jesus that comes to teach us that the sacrifice that is more pleasing to God is the individual's moral transformation. So we have come a long way. Even nowadays, sometimes when I was reflecting about this, I was like, I think that we still do a lot of self-punishment. As when we neglect ourselves, when we don't give ourselves the very best, when we make poor choices for ourselves. I wonder how much of our memories of these patterns of human holocaust, of self-infliction, of punishment, of guilt remains within us and are true obstacles for us, for the movement that we invited to do today, which is a movement of self-acceptance, self-love, and to truly give ourselves the very best. But in order to do that, we need to be connected with the idea that we are deserving of that. If we don't believe that, then we have a problem, a big problem. But Jesus comes to tell us that forget all of this. What really, really matters to God is your effort towards your own betterment. This is what God's want. This is the greatest of all sacrifices that life is asking from us. So this is Emmanuel. I was looking at the book The Consoler in Portuguese, and Emmanuel has some statements that go right along with these ideas brought by Joanna. He will say, only now will the human soul be able to delve into itself enough to understand the needs and recesses of its spiritual personality. In the past, man's existence was limited to the struggle with external forces to create a law of harmony between himself and nature. Many centuries passed before it became evident to humanity the convenience of solidarity to face common dangers. The organization of the tribe, the family, the traditions, the collective experience require many centuries of struggle and painful misfortunes. So now we came to this place where the outside world is under control. Even hurricanes, we know when they are coming. So this allows us to do what? Now we are invited to gain control of the inside. So look at this. This is so beautiful. It was necessary for the evolution to take place in this way. We needed to grow. We needed to develop our thinking. We need to develop the brain. We need to control the external forces. So now that everything is under control as much as possible, we have the time, the flexibility, and the space to go inwards. That's what the present moment is asking for ourselves. I highlighted this in yellow because this is the most important slide of the entire presentation. Understandably, after the extremely long passage through the phase of instinctual and conditioned reflexes, the short time since the attainment of logical thinking has not yet allowed the Homo sapiens to overcome deeply ingrained automatisms in order to act in better ways rather than always react. The archetypes remain aggressive and defensive, and their behavior is dictated more by the ego than by the self, requiring ongoing effort to overcome bad inclinations. I feel like putting on my refrigerator and reading every day. Why? Here we are. And this goes back to what that person was talking here at the center. I see her frustration with her impulses, with her aggression, with her hostility, which is mine too. I deal with that. But we are still aggressive and defensive animals. And that is what we have for today. And this is why. It's been only 10,000 years. We are just, if you think of the seed, we have been able to break through the coarse shell. We are kind of making our way through the dark soils, and we are just cracking the surface. When we reach this level of discernment is when we see the light. We still have a trajectory of growth from the surface, but we are cracking that surface. We are starting to see the light. So we have to have this understanding so that we don't add to the natural struggles and pains of life this unreasonable suffering of unreasonable expectations. They are not achievable for the present moment. And so Joanna says here, to overcome the bad inclinations. What do we know with Kardec about the bad inclinations? Now, I want to bring your attention here to something. In the Gospel, it says, true spirits are recognized by the moral transformation and the efforts they make to overcome their evil inclinations. Okay? But in Portuguese, the word is domar. Okay? Domar. Domar is to tame. In French, the word is dompter, not sure if it's, which means also tame. And why do I bring this up? Because overcome and tame are two very different words with very different meanings. Okay? Overcome leads to moral transformation. When you overcome, you have won over something. When you think of evolution, there are 3 stages of evolution. When you have a bad inclination and you act on it, when you have a bad inclination and you choose not to act on it, and you no longer have the bad inclination, that's overcoming. And that's moral transformation. And that's what leads us on the vertical movement. But on the horizontal, here we are. what are we trying to do? We're trying to tame. We're not yet on the overcoming phase. We are taming. That is very important. If you look at the sentence, tame, reduce from a state of native wildness, especially so as to be tractable and useful to humans. It's domesticated, made docile and submissive, lacking speed or insipid is another. Now, to overcome is to get better off, surmount, to gain the superiority, to win. So, we will get to overcoming, but right now we're taming. We're taming. Right? Because Christ had overcome. So, he suffered all types of aggressions, and there was not within him any movement to retaliate. There was only love. That is overcome. So we will overcome. It's a long journey. It's a journey of knowing oneself. But in the meantime, we are invited to tame our actions so that we don't hurt others and we don't hurt ourselves. We don't compromise our existence. So I say, I will not retaliate verbally. But I have the conscience that the hostility and the desire to retaliate remains within me. I am fully aware. And that awareness is extremely important because without awareness, there is no transformation. The awareness is the very first important step. You become aware and you allow yourself to feel. You can feel, you cannot break, you cannot hate, you cannot curse, but yes, you can feel. Because in feeling, you're going to get to what is this coming from? What is this doing? What is this telling me? Now, this is psychologically taming. So it's not like substituting that aggression with some, fake, let's say, loving actions. No. To tame is to allow yourself to feel, to be aware, and to make a choice not to act. Keeping the consciousness that this is where you are, without guilt. Because this is also part of the evolutionary process. These hostility, these operandi motives of instinct and aggression has been with us for all the time that we look at. So, few questions of the Spirit's book, 908, tell us that passions are like a horse that is useful when controlled, but danger when it controls. In 909, it reminds us that we could overcome our evil tendencies, our bad tendencies, with a little effort. When we believe that we cannot overcome our passions, is because the Spirit is pleased by them as a result of their own impurity. I thought about this question because, no one is consciously saying, I want to remain unhappy, right? Mm-hmm. So please here is not that we are choosing unhappiness, but it is that because of our fears, because of our wounds or whatever that might be, we are still not yet able to make a better choice for ourselves. Those who try to restrain them understand their spiritual nature, and overcoming them is a triumph of the spirit over matter. This is overcoming, is when we become way more spiritual than material. And he's going to say the most effective means to fight the predominance of corporeal nature, the instincts, is the practice of self-denial, abnegation, renunciation. So here's some exercises, right, for us to do. So what we're proposing here is go inwards, but in the meantime, pay attention to your reactions above all. And let's keep working on taming those reactions, but also doing small exercises of abnegation and renunciation. And this is Emmanuel again, who's going to say, it is essential that we renounce our small desires. They are peculiar to us, to achieve the capacity for sacrifice that will structure our evolution at higher levels. Very beautiful, very inspiring. So sometimes we ask, what is it that we can do today? We can start with those little exercises. Everybody knows what they are. It's to forget yourself for a moment, to put someone else first. Even if that costs you, even if that hurts you. But this is truly what characterizes the higher spirits. There is a passage from Emmanuel as well that says that when you see a higher level spirit who discarnates to leave this planet, you will see a very enlightened spirit moving upwards towards the higher spheres. But if the spirit was not only characterized by a high level of intellectual and even moral development, but his or her life was characterized by sacrifice, by abnegation, not only you see the light around the spirit, but you see a path of light that is left behind. Because abnegation really expands our light. It really creates a different psychosphere in terms of evolution and elevation. And this is what he is inviting us. Fraternity can be translated into sincere and legitimate cooperation in all the work of life. And in all true cooperation, personalism cannot subsist, highlighting that whoever cooperates always gives up something of themselves, giving testimony of selflessness, without which fraternity would not manifest itself in the world in any way. Remember that Joanna said that we are very far away from being here, but we already have the references, and we have the capacity to start with our small exercises of abnegation and selflessness. So in wrapping up, so here we are today. All these evolutionary experiences are registered in our unconscious, undoubtedly advancing with the support of psychological crushes its needs, without which the process of self-awareness would be much harder. So that's another thing. We have emotional crutches. It's been a long, tough road up to where we are. We have done much harm. We have harmed others. We have harmed ourselves. We have been through tons of suffering and pain. We have created defenses. We are using emotional crutches, and it's okay. It's okay, because that has helped us to get over here. The rehabilitation process is to strengthen the body so you can let go of the assisted devices. That's what I do, right? So spiritually, we also have emotional crutches that have helped us to get here where we are. So we need to understand this crutch is helping me to manage what? We do that with our addictions. This glass of wine at the end of the day is helping me with what? This inability to stop working at any moment is helping me with what? The need to read this much is helping me with what? So we have many, many ways in which those psychological crutches are being used and manifest in our lives, helping us to move forward. But when you use a crutch, and as a matter of fact, any assisted device, although it helps you in the moment, in the long term, it weakens the body. So if you're using a crutch because you don't have a balance, for example, as long as you have that crutch, you have balance. But what it does, it takes away your ability to use your hip muscles, which are really the other muscles that you use for balance. So if you want to get rid of the crutch, you have to strengthen your hip muscles. So the same way with our psychological crutches. If you want to get rid of them, you have to find where is the weakness, emotionally, spiritually, that needs to be strengthened so that you can let go of that emotional crutch. And we'll finish with this one. No one can stop the dawn. It is very comforting to see that overcoming of the instincts, thanks to the evolution of reason, is a natural phenomenon within the reach of all who, after having transcended the primal phases of the anthropologic process, aspire to conquer goals reserved for angelhood. In a poetic imagery, the self emerges from the darkness into the light, think of the seed, like a diamond freed from the coarse envelope where it hides to reflect, after being polished, the brightness of the stars. So this is us, not the Netflix series, but us here in Conscious Living. This is our humanity. This is where we are. The beautiful and the hopeful part of this message is that no one can stop the new day, the new time that's coming. It's very comforting because we know that those instincts that hold us back today, they will diminish. With the evolution of reason, the more we learn to think, the more we are capable of acting and not reacting. And this is a natural phenomenon. So we don't have to worry about it. It's in nature. It's in our nature. It's within you, as it has been since the moment that we were created. When Suzana says the presence of God from the very beginning, even when we couldn't make sense of the world, God is in us, as this force propelling us forward. So in that certainty, we can rest. In that certainty, we can breathe. In that certainty, we can trust. And we can understand that everything is okay. We are good where we are. And we can move forward and we can leave here today. Oh, the only one that was not translated. In God's time. In God's time, not in our time. This is God's time. Appreciate for a moment the time that it took to get us here. We are talking about millions of years. Millions. And here we are, dying, taking medication for anxiety so we can sleep, so we can function. A lot of times, because we are operating very unrealistic expectations for ourselves. So wherever you are, you're okay. You have done this incredible evolution. You have overcome the darkest of the soils. You are cracking the light. From now on, things are going to be better. Life will be better. Not easier necessarily because, again, or not without struggles, because the struggles are what shape us. But it's going to get better because we used to be so hostile. And when you're hostile towards others, you receive hostility. Today, we're capable to choose forgiveness, to choose love, to choose better for ourselves. Because we have a better understanding. So in that, let's rest. In that, let's breathe. And in that, let's live here with renewed hope on our own becoming. Thank you.
Wow. What a great way to start our Sunday, huh? I don't know about you all, but I feel much lighter.
Good.
Thank you, Suzana. I bet this was your purpose for us today. And so now we're going to go to there's an announcement that it's really important that I left out, and it's about our event coming up in Orlando. What are the dates? 25th?
6th and 7th of April.
6th and 7th of April in Orlando. There's still tickets available, but they are going fast. So you can go on our page, and you can also go on our page on Facebook for all the meetings that I mentioned before. Usually we have them, but since we had little technical difficulties, it wasn't on the screen. But if you go to our pages, all of our studies, everything is there, all the information that you need. Once again, we'd like to thank you. Wish you a very happy Sunday. Those at home, if you want to stay with us, bring your bottle of water. Just concentrate and just think about Jesus while we prepare for our passes through a small prayer. Dear Jesus, mentors of this point of light, thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you for all the teachings, for everything that was brought to us. And we ask the mentors of this house, we ask our personal mentors to help us open our hearts and mind. Please come close to our past givers and open the hearts of those who are receiving it, so that everybody can benefit from these wonderful energies that are spread right now. In your name, we thank you. So be it.